Hello students, my name is Shreya and I am here to discuss the change in syllabus of UGC NET English Literature question paper which will be implemented from the examination that is going to be held in June 2019. Right? So now this change, as some of you would already know, is something that I would call a drastic change. Right? Now the samples of this change was already seen in the UGC NET examination that was held in 2018, which was the December paper, right? Like I was discussing the paper with you and I told you the paper has become more critical, right? It has become more critical than learning. And now there has been the change in syllabus has further emphasized on the same point, right? So let us look at the whatever the syllabus initially was. Let us first, I'll tell you what the syllabus initially used to be. The 5 sections that I've constantly been talking of in all my videos, the 5 sections that we used to do for the syllabus. So the 5 sections were, there was a history of English literature, right, which used to cover all the eras and all important works of that era. Then there used to be world literature that we covered. Within world literature, we covered various literatures like American, Afro-American, African, Canadian, Australian, and Indian. And there were some important literatures that came out of France or say Germany or Italy or Russia that we also completed in world literatures, right? Then there was the third section, which was literary theory and criticism, right? So here we covered all important theories like Marxism, feminism, post-colonialism, post-structuralism, structuralism, post-structuralism, right? So these are the theories that we covered and many more of these. And here we discuss some of the important essays by great thinkers like Aristotle, Plato, Wordsworth also in the same list of lyrical ballads, Coleridge, Keats' idea of negative capability, T.S. Eliot. It's all the important essays, even going back to Hobbes, Rousseau, Locke, right? So all these people we did with Sidney, Shelley. So a lot of people we did in criticism, right? Then there was the fourth portion of rhetorics and prosody, right? So rhetorics is your figure of speech, whereas prosody means the rhyme scheme, etc. that are present in the poem. And the fifth portion was your ELT, which is the English language teaching. So how does one learn? What are the various techniques of learning new language? Which covered techniques of learning new language. And now this portion used to be the last time only 2 questions were from this portion. Now what has happened now? Let us look at the important change that has taken place now, right? The question paper has been divided into 10 units, giving a clear-cut indication that if there are 100 questions, although it's not mentioned like it's mentioned in paper 1, where there are 10 units and it's said that 5 questions will come from each unit. Here, nothing like that is mentioned, but when there are 10 units and 100 questions, on an average, we assume that 10 questions from each unit, right? So, the first, second, third and fourth unit is where the drastic changes occurred. The first one is drama, the second one is poetry, and like when I was discussing the paper with you, I said there is a lot of importance on poetry this time, which wasn't the case in the previous examinations, right? There is fiction that includes specifically short story. So I remember while we teach or while we were preparing also, we never focused on short stories that much. We never focused on the story of the short story itself. But now they've specifically mentioned and gone out of the way to mention short story. So fiction is not just novels and novellas, right? And then there is non-fiction prose. So non-fiction prose is not just a part of non-fiction prose we study anyways under criticism, which is going to form a part of unit. They have also specifically gone ahead and mentioned non-fiction. Now for all these combined 4 units, they have given a note where they said for the 4 units, comprehension will also be tested. Right? First, there's also, right? So there are still going to be some questions, at least I believe, that are going to be direct. Right? For instance, there were not too many direct questions this time around also. But I think their number is still going to exist, but it's going to reduce drastically. So then that becomes an extremely difficult task for you here. Because you have to still go through the history of English literature. You have to still go through the history of English literature. You have to still do all the world literatures that you used to do. But focus on it in a manner that's more comprehension oriented. Although there still could be direct questions because for the first 4 units, the syllabus particularly says that the units will be tested through comprehension passages that test critical reading, critical thinking and writing skills. And then it says it covers all literatures in English. So it's a clear indication that all world and British literature is covered. That is one thing. So it's not like world literature is removed from the question paper as some of you were saying. Right? There is world literature. Secondly, there are going to be some direct questions, so you can't completely ignore the history of English literature. But what I would suggest you now is really focus on other aspects of literature than the mugging up that people used to do with history of English literature, looking at each author, the authors that are not that important, learning each of their works, learning the eras in which they were written, trying to arrange it in chronological order. I feel gone are the times of those things, right? Now the understanding and the reading has to be more literature-like, as it was supposed to be, right? So this is the first 4 units and this is all I had to say about these, right? Then there is the 5th unit, which is language, concepts, theory and pedagogy. Do you realize the amount of focus that is given on theory? And this is where what problem did we constantly have with the NET exam? That it's too much mugging up. For English, it's nonsensical. It's not an English paper. When I'm asked Virginia Woolf, I'm not asked about any of her works. I'm asked what is the name of the work or what is the year that the work was written in. I'm not asked about stream of consciousness as I understood Virginia Woolf in the university, as I understood Virginia Woolf through the eyes of literature, but I'm only asked the year. And it was very demeaning for me as a student to answer those kind of questions. But now that has changed. There is a lot of focus on theory and I'm glad about it, right? So for language, concepts, theories and pedagogy, some theories that we can discuss about language would include, say, Plato. A lot of people, a lot of your philosophers have written on language and how should language be acquired and what is the role of language, right? So there's Plato. There's Descartes, right, whose theory is also known as the Cartesian theory. There's also Locke and his theory of tabula rasa, that all mind is a blank slate and you can acquire whatever you want to. There's going to be Noam Chomsky, who's a very important linguist. Right? And his idea of universal grammar, where he says all humans have a natural tendency towards language. We're going to go through these in great detail now because it forms a particular unit. But I'm just giving you an outline and an overview. Then there's Skinner that we are going to do, who sees language as the behaviors, who sees language as a response to stimuli. So like for instance, in this time question paper, there was a question on Butler English. Right, so what is Butler English? Butler English is the kind of pidgin. It's a pidgin which was formed due to interaction of people who were coming from the colonial empire and were trying to trade with people of Madras, right? So it was an interactive language. It was a response to stimuli, and so is it's a similar aspect in which Skinner is talking about. It's a similar domain in which Skinner talks of behavior being a response to the stimuli, right? Then there is Schumann, right, who's going to discuss language acquired by migrants as they immigrate. right? So these are going to form some basic theories in language. We're going to discuss more, and there's going to be the concepts as to why is language formed, what is the role of language in your life, how does language from a mode of communication become an I? How does language become I? How does language become a living entity? How does language become a cultural entity, right? So all these things are going to be discussed in this portion. Then there is the sixth portion, that is English in India, right? And its history, evolution and development. History, evolution and future, right? So history again, how was English introduced in India? What is Wood's Dispatch? Which also makes a part of your, right? How was English first introduced by the colonial empire, and what was the extent to which English was introduced? How did it evolve? How did it become the English that we understand? Then like Braj Kachru's concept of world Englishes. What is the concept of world Englishes? How is our English today Indian English, and influence of both the English that we took from the colonizer as well as what we gave to English ourselves, right? So all these things about evolution of English, how did English come into being, and how did it evolve into what we understand of it now, right? So all those things about that. Then there is the important portion. There's the seventh portion, which is the cultural studies. So now while we were doing all the aspects of cultural studies separately, now cultural studies has become a central focus here. Now what is culture? Culture is like a force and which facilitates social change, right? So it's a constantly changing symbol. It's a constantly changing and constantly interacting set of practices. Right? And it is through this interaction of elements that we understand these theories. So what are some of the theories that I've always been discussing also when the paper only said literary criticism and theory, but now even more so, right? So there's going to be Marxism, that what role does money have in the way the society is functioning. Then feminism, right? Then there's going to be race theory. There is obviously going to be post-colonial theory, right? There's going to be queer theory, and all about the LGBT politics, right? And all these and more, right? So we're just going to discuss, feminism will also include black feminism, Indian feminism, because the scope has been widened. It was never a section independently. Now they have given us this section. So for 10 marks, if we assume that there are going to be 10 mark question for a year, it is going to be huge. We are going to do at least 10 to 12 essays from feminism. Similarly with Marxism, post-colonial again, even more. So not just your Fanon and 𝐒𝐤𝐴𝐻𝐿 and your Achebe's essay on Conrad's Heart of Darkness, but even going further into understanding what kind of essays were written by the African writers, by the Afro-American writers, Indian writers, etc. So all those things are also going to be covered. And the new emerging, queer theory, LGBT politics, masculine theory. Little bit about Foucault as well. So the idea of discourse and power and politics in society. Power and knowledge in society, right? And the role those play. Right? So these will also be covered. Then there is the important, which is the 8th section, which is literary criticism. So now they've already, like I told you, have mentioned the fact that there is going to be non-fictional prose. But again they've mentioned in the 8th section that there is going to be literary criticism. So all these ideas, all these criticisms that form the central of our literary arguments, like the Wordsworth's preface to Lyrical Ballads, how central it is to our argument of understanding romanticism, right? So for instance, other essays like Coleridge's Imagination and Fancy, right? So the idea between imagination and fancy, the divisions, the detailed understanding of what is primary and secondary imagination, right? So there's going to be romantic criticism, there's going to be traditional criticism or classic criticism as we understand it, which would include Longinus and his idea of sublime, Aristotle and his views on poetry, Plato and his views on poetry, then Horace and his Ars Poetica and what is the idea of poetry that he is trying to propagate, where he says it should be both. It should also give instruction as well to an extent. There is going to be aesthetics theory where art is there for art's sake, etc. So all those will be covered in literary criticism. But mind you, it's going to be a detailed and more exaggerated discussion in terms of literary criticism. Why? Because it's important now for not just me to explain to you. For instance, I'd already done the essay, which is Rolabat's essay, Death of the Author, in the class, and I'd explained the basic concept as to the fact that the author dies immediately as the reader is born. Because as soon as I give you a description, a written description of a mountain and a house and a river, I know immediately as you're listening to this video also, you've created an image in your mind. Right? I know you've created an image in your mind where the house looks different than what I had said it, right? So the audience, as soon as the reader is born, the author has to by default die, right? The author has to be killed, and this I'd done in the class. But the question was a detailed question. So, like I was saying, this time around, I'd already done the essay in the class. But this time around, the question that appeared was also along the options. So it was a complete extract that was given in the question. So there was particular lines from the essay, and then in the options, there was not just Death of the Author, there was also What is an Author by Foucault. So now it becomes important for us to read these essays in the class, right? We're going to read these essays in the class so that you do not get intimidated by the literary jargon that follows, because it's important for us to now have a reading and understanding of these essays also, right? Then there is the 9th section, which is Literary Theory post-World War II. Right? These would again include the postmodern theory, so the idea of celebration of your disintegration, post-structural theory, right? Again, which breaks down the structure, which is also known as deconstruction. And also existential theory to a great extent. Right? Because these all come with the anxiety as to what now? The world war's over. The world war's got a lot of destruction. So what now? How do we get ourselves back into structure? How do we get ourselves in a post-structural world and still abide by a structure? How do I get myself in a postmodern world and still be okay with the fact that there is going to be no structure to my life or my understanding of life, right? So all these things I already and always cover a lot of deconstruction and post-structuralism and postmodernism. For postmodernism, we do an essay by Lyotard called Answering the Question, What is Postmodern? For deconstruction, we do Derrida, but now this time around, we are also going to do the M.H. Abrahams essay, Deconstructing Angel. Right? That is also an important... Right? So that is also going to be done this time around, Deconstructive Angel by M.H. Abrahams. And then there is the last part, which is the research methods. So for all other papers and for all other subjects that there is a NET on, there is also usually a unit on research methods, but it was not available for literature. And the fact of the matter remains that it is required for literature also to have a research method. Why? Because the research is not usually a quantitative research, it's a qualitative research. Secondly, it's usually it does not really involve too much field work, and it's a lot of sitting down and reading down. And so it's important and extremely important, I feel, that there must be a proper structure to English literature research as well. Right? Because it's a part of the reason why once we enter after clearing the NET exam, etc., when we have to sit for research, why we feel so lost. Right? Because there's no proper structure that is given to us for the research. And irrespective of how artistic you want to go with your research proposal or your PhD final dissertation, there is a need for it to be in a proper structure, right? So there is this this unit is also introduced, and this will be in respect to, it's not going to be a general research methodology that comes in your paper 1, it's going to be much more in respect to only English research, right? So these are your 10 units. It's a good change, I feel. It's a welcome change. It's going to make things more complicated, but in a manner that we would enjoy. We would really enjoy now studying for this exam, because it's going to help you go through brief history of English literature, brief knowledge of all the world literature texts, and then really focus on theories, which always forms, according to me, the heart of English literature, right? Books, etc. we're going to discuss as we go on, right? So thank you for watching the video. If you think this was helpful, if you feel we could help you along the way with preparation, you can come down to Global Teachers Academy, right? We have offline classes as well as online classes. So you can you can contact the numbers that are given. For any suggestions, for any requests for books, for any request on any video lecture, you can always leave that in the comment box. Thank you.